this. In her book, Caliban and the Witch, philosopher Silvia Federici argues that the witch hunts played a huge role in shaping the world today that for a long time we've ignored, especially those of us who are politically left-wing. Particularly Marxists have ignored it. So, at the risk of attracting the wrong kind of internet audience, I gotta say, Karl Marx was not 100% right about everything. Hello? You want to donate how much to my Patreon? When we talk about the transition from feudalism to capitalism, it sounds like a very smooth and civil process, but actually it was an incredibly bloody trip. In Europe, the Black Death killed about 1 in 3 people, and those at the bottom of society who survived suddenly found that they were pretty indispensable and could start making demands of the people at the top. And so feudalism started to crack. There was a lot of resistance to both it and the early nascent forms of capitalism that were slouching towards Europe to be born. And a lot of these early anti-feudal and anti-capitalist resistance movements were led by women. Meanwhile, in the colonies, indigenous resistance to European invasion, like the Taky-Oncoy movement in Peru, offered prominent roles to rebellious women as well. It's maybe tempting to think that these struggles could never have succeeded because they were too primitive, or basically because the Poors were too stupid. But a lot of these early anti-feudal and anti-capitalist resistance movements were pretty philosophically sophisticated, like the Diggers in England, for instance. And they were succeeding fine until they were brutalized. There might be an interesting parallel there to how we talk about some anti-capitalist countries today. In addition to wielding increasing amounts of disruptive political power, though, women in medieval Europe already held a lot of social power. And that's because of... There are still many people today who believe in Wicca or paganism, and ritual magic can be an important part of that spiritual practice. But undeniably, belief in magic used to be a lot more widespread than it is now, and magic was an arena in which women dominated. If you had a problem, you would go and see a wise woman. If you wanted her to cure your toothache, or tell you your future, or talk to the dead for you, you would seek out a witch. She would know about herbs and healing. And not all of it was nonsense, some of it was just pre-scientific medicine. She might also be the village midwife, for instance. Someone who believes in magic will behave differently from someone who doesn't. If you want to use the postmodern jargon, magical thinking is a technology of the self, as Foucault might put it. It creates a certain kind of person. If you'd rather explain it in terms of behavior than power creating selves, I won't hold it against you, because at the risk of attracting the wrong kind of internet audience, in fairness, postmodernists aren't always 100% right about everything. Hello? Hello, Dr. Peterson. Yeah, come over for dinner? Yeah, I'd love to. What are you cooking? Oh. Back when a lot of people believed in magic, establishing capitalism, Federici says, was difficult. Because what is magic at the end of the day? It's the promise of getting something for nothing. Of a world without work, and without strict rules or boundaries in the way that science strives for or capitalism requires to organize labor. Federici says that magic, and the practice of magic, is the refusal of work in action. There's a popular idea that our ancestors used magic to explain things because they just didn't have modern science, and in my view that can be a little bit patronizing. Rather like the idea that the early anti-capitalist and anti-feudal rebellions could never have succeeded, it sort of portrays the people involved as being daft. And yes, a lot of people in history, just like now, were pretty daft. But magic isn't meant to explain things. Like a lot of spiritual practices, it can be about community and solidarity, but it's also the refusal of an explanation. Put the right ingredients together and you can make someone fall in love. Confound your enemies, turn invisible, fly. How exactly does it work? Yeah, you're asking the wrong question. It's magic. There are some days that are just bad for working. Don't plant crops on those days. Never mind why, it's just bad luck. Don't do it. Gotta rest. It's a world of the qualitative, not the quantitative. Which, incidentally, is why Harry Potter is a bit of a bourgeois fantasy. The whole idea that magic might have set rules that could be learned like a science, taught in a school, a private school no less, to be brought under a capitalist social system, is a bit of a perversion or modernization, depending on how you look at it, of what magic was originally all about. But medieval Europe, you've got a lot of rebellious women running around and a lot of people who believe in magic, neither of which is particularly conducive for bringing everybody into a new economic order where they have to work for somebody else or starve. The goal of capitalist society is to transform life into the capacity to work, says Federici. So how do you build capitalism in those conditions? You have to break the power of women. What is the role of cis women under capitalism? In the years since women have joined the general workforce, the official answer to that question has been, well, they work, same as men. Not always paid the same and subject to various fudges, but that's what it's supposed to be anyway. But it wasn't always so. For most of capitalist history, the official job of women in society was to make babies, to reproduce the labour force, and the witch hunts were key to cementing that role. Obviously, people were having babies before capitalism, and women weren't completely equal to men under feudalism either. But as a result of the witch hunts, women's options in society were massively curtailed, even from what they'd been before. Rather than a steady progress of women's rights throughout history, things actually got worse. In general, this period was characterised by a massive rollback of women's rights. Not just the rights to work and acquire property, but abortion and contraception, such as they were criminalised. Sex work was subjected to harsher and harsher restrictions, or else outright criminalised. Any kind of sex that wasn't procreative, including homosexuality, some gay men were burned as well, was frowned upon. Midwifery and medicine generally was taken away from women and given to men, as many midwives found themselves on the wrong end of a pitchfork, all of which combined to tie women to the domestic sphere, even more so than before, only this time with a twist. Whereas under feudalism you might have kids and they could help you on your land or with your trade, under capitalism your kids go and work for somebody else to put money in their pocket. Women were expected to, unpaid, reproduce and rear the next generation of workers who would work to put profit in somebody else's pocket. And indeed, they basically still are. In the 70s, second-wave feminists used to talk about the second shift, the burden of having to go home after work, and then on top of work, maintain the home and kids. And the pyres and fires of the witch hunts are what forged that model of the ideal woman. Chaste, quiet, at home, working to support the husband who brings home the bacon. And through it all, the figure of the witch was used to bring women to heel and encourage men to hold the leash. The link between witchcraft charges and tying women only to a reproductive role in society is evidenced in the specific nature of witchcraft charges. Witches were often accused of sacrificing children, of sexually cavorting with the devil by moonlight, of causing impotence, or stealing your penis. Keep an eye on your girl, fellas, or Satan will cuck you yet. The perversion of the natural order that witches were supposed to represent presupposed a natural order in which women were subservient and made for making babies. And Federici says it's a shame that Marx ignored all of this. In the Marxist jargon, she says the witch hunts were a form of primitive accumulation, the violent grabbing of resources that was key to starting capitalism off, just as important, she says, as slavery and colonialism were. She writes, "The outcome of these policies that lasted for 2 centuries was the enslavement of women to procreation, defining women in terms mothers, wives, daughters, widows that hid their status as workers." Before we get into the really off-the-wall stuff, we should take stock and also consider an important 21st century health warning. We've talked about how the witch hunts were key to eliminating magical thinking and reducing women to a reproductive role, and how both those things were important to establishing capitalism. But something worth bearing in mind is that although